I'd like to welcome you to tonight's talk. Just briefly, this is the first in a series of talks that the Green Party of New York State has organized. Our next one is going to be on June 24th. That's Tuesday, June 24th. And actually, I'll be speaking on eco-socialism, what it is, and why capitalism is causing the end of the world and the climate catastrophe. But we can talk more about that at the end. What I'd like to do right now is begin to introduce our guest speaker, Asher Ross. Asher is going to be speaking on the situation here in New York State and nationally in terms of immigration and immigrant rights and the attacks on immigrants that have been coming from the Trump administration over the last 6 months, and what's being done here in New York and what can be done, right? As an organization, the Green Party supports immigrant rights and is works as much as we can against the Trump and the Biden administration's kind of bipartisan policy of attacks on immigrants and the laws that have been passed over the last couple of years that have been pretty draconian, and the deportations that have been happening. So I won't take too much time except to say, if you're interested in getting involved with the Green Party of New York, that you should join our mailing list. You can go to gpny.org to do that. You can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we would love to have you follow us and get involved in organizing and the fight. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Asher Ross, who is the senior strategist for the New York Immigration Coalition. And I will let him describe what's going on in terms of immigration policy in New York State and nationally in 2025.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you all for having me. As Peter mentioned, my name is Asher. I use he, him pronouns. I'm based in New York City, and I actually work for NYIC Action, which is the C4 sister organization of the New York Immigration Coalition. So I'm going to start off by just talking about a little bit about New York's immigrant population and some of the issues that affect it. I'm going to talk about the New York Immigration Coalition, what it is, who it is, and what it does. And I'm also going to then go to the real majority of this is going to be about what's at stake in New York State right now, politically in particular, and what people are doing to fight for immigrant justice, for immigrant rights under this Trump administration. So first of all, I just want to note that New York State has about 4.5 million foreign-born residents, and that's about 23% of the population. So an extremely large immigrant population in New York. If you include the children of immigrants, first generation Americans, there's actually close to 8 million immigrant New Yorkers. So almost 40% of the population in New York is immigrants, foreign born, or the children of foreign born residents. So really, we have a problem already before Trump, whereas 40% of the population are in immigrant communities, but much less than 40% of the budget is allocated and is benefiting those communities, and much less than 40% of our elected officials are from those communities and look like those communities. So we already have a problem with fair representation in the state, but also we have ongoing social economic issues that affect these communities that are specific to them. Just want to note that New York, really, we often talk about how we have the most diverse immigrant population of any state in the country. So there's one or two more that have more density of immigrants, but in New York, we have immigrant communities from every continent and numerous, language diversity, cultural diversity that comes from our immigrant community. So the New York Immigration Coalition was founded in the 80s and really is one of the largest immigrant justice advocacy organizations in the country. and like I said, representing the most diverse immigrant communities in the country. The NYIC is composed of over 200 grassroots community organizations that are across the state from Buffalo to Suffolk. And these are many different types of organizations, very small ones that do provide services, direct service provision to their constituency. We have large ones that advocate around specific nationalities as well as specific issues. For instance, domestic workers, delivery workers, farm workers, refugees, etc. So there's many different types of organizations, large and small. There's also even other advocacy organizations that do similar things, but locally, in the local level across the state. So the NYC really has that diversity and breadth across the state that's unlike any other immigrant advocacy org in the state. So just want to mention that this and the New York Immigration Coalition has a 501c4 sister organization, and that means that and I work for that organization, NYSC Action, and we actually can endorse and support candidates and take part in partisan politics in elections. Um, and so I'll talk a little bit later about what we do at the NYSC Action, but really, in short, we vet candidates for office. We often, help recruit and support people who would like to run, come from immigrant communities. We also have an endorsement process each year where we have a questionnaire and a policy platform pledge for anyone who's seeking the endorsement of NYSC Action. And this is to really be able to vet candidates and identify the best candidates who are really allies and champions for immigrant justice. So I'm going to just provide the link for NYSC Action. In that site, you can see our questionnaire, you can see our policy platform pledge, you can see the list of who we've endorsed in this year's New York City elections. And then I'm also going to provide the link for the New York Immigration Coalition and our website for the C3. And I'm just going to give you a pretty high level summary of what we've been working on this year and our campaigns for both for budget demands at the state level and the New York City level, as well as our legislative campaigns to pass bills protecting and strengthening immigrant rights. And I'm going to make this a pretty brief presentation. There's a lot of policy details that we could really go deep into, but I'm going to keep it pretty high level, hopefully, and I'll be happy to try to answer questions later. Like I said, I work for the C4, NYSC Action. I am not a policy expert, but, I am around the work. I work with colleagues who are, and they do organizing, they do policy work, they do fundraising, and they do communications are really the areas of work for the NYSC. So I have absorbed a lot of this information and hopefully can give you a good and informative presentation on it. So first of all, obviously we are in a new and very scary and um, a very hostile environment politically with the Trump administration, which ran on anti-immigrant platform, probably the most anti-immigrant federal administration that we've had ever. And I probably don't need to tell you a whole lot about the deportations that have happened so far in this administration, the activity by the ICE agency, and the overall climate that they've created. With illegal deportations, kidnappings, even even U.S. citizens, but also targeting immigrants. And this has actually there's been a really major uptick even in the past few weeks. We've seen ICE adopting new tactics of ambushing people at their just regularly scheduled court hearings. This happened in Buffalo. It happened in New York City already in the past month, and it seems to just continue to increase week by week. Um, and of course, we've seen crackdown on certain protesters, on people with just exercising free speech. But it was targeting non-citizens and threatening them with deportation. So I'm sure that everyone is well aware of all these sorts of developments. And really, what I want to focus on is how this political landscape at the federal level makes it more important than ever to strengthen and protect our state's protections of immigrants. So, in other words, we have a sanctuary state with sanctuary state policies. Um, and we also have those policies for New York City, and we call ourselves a sanctuary city. And really, right now, all of those policies are under threat. Trump is threatening to strip states of federal funding if they have sanctuary policy, cities as well. And really, there right now, from the advocacy point of view, there's a rush to pass stronger legislation and get more money in the budget to protect our state policy and make it Trump proof, so to speak. Let's try to make our state and city Trump proof. Excuse me. Um, so the legislation and budget demands that I'm going to tell you about are really all following those themes and along those lines. So first of all, at the state level, the New York Immigration Coalition has several really key policy legislative priorities. And one of the biggest ones is called the Care for Immigrant Families campaign. And I should actually be able to tell you what the acronym fully stands for, but basically it's access to legal representation is what the Care for Immigrant Families campaign is seeking to accomplish and to pass. Right now, it's more important than ever that we get strong legal services, and that means providing free legal services, free lawyers to people who are facing immigration court proceedings and even deportation. This is one of the best ways that we can really defend immigrant rights in this moment more than ever. So that campaign has actually been something that advocates have worked on for years and won a lot of really great success with. And in the past few years, we've managed to double the actual budget for legal representation, so and legal services. Um, Basically, this year we were demanding $175 million in the state budget for these free legal services and improving legal structures. And the budget process has wrapped up in New York, um, and it wrapped up a few weeks ago, and $64.2 million ended up being allocated to immigrant legal services through the Office of what's called the Office of New Americans of New York State. And that level of funding is about the same as it was last year, but much, much more than it was 2 years ago and prior to that. So we did not get the 175 million, but we did at least maintain a sizable budget allocation for those services. The other part of the campaign is to pass something called the Access to Representation Act and the Building Unrepresented Immigrant Legal Defense Act. And neither of these things have passed yet, but these would codify, some of these services and make them more durable programs rather than just have to be passed in each state budget every single year and be subject to vagaries of politics at any given time. Another really big priority I want to mention is our language access campaigns. Basically, this is to ensure that people have translation for all city and state services. For state services in this instance, and regardless of language proficiency, that everyone is able to access the services they need and are entitled to. So we actually were able to win 2.3 million uh, in the budget that's been allocated to the Office of Language Access, and this is less than the 10 million that we were asking for, but it's still considerable. Another state campaign I'll mention, I don't want to go into it too much, is the Working Families Tax Credit. And this is to expand tax credit for working class people that would combine the Empire State Child Credit, Earned Income Tax Credit, and a dependent exemption into a bigger and better tax credit for working families. It's not actually specific to immigrants, but it would affect millions of immigrants. And we fought for this in coalition with a lot of other progressive organizations. But it hasn't passed yet. It could pass this year, but it hasn't happened yet. The last thing for state priorities is, and this is really the most important one in a sense, and the one that really is hanging in the balance right now that I want to really draw your attention to the most, is the New York for All Act. The New York for All Act, we have been fighting for this legislation the past few years, has not won, but in this moment, we really do need our elected officials to pass this bill. It would basically prohibit any coordination and collusion between New York State agencies, including police and sheriffs, and federal ICE. So this would prevent our government agencies and police force from disclosing sensitive information, from coordinating, from diverting personnel and resources to federal immigration enforcement. This is very close to passing, and we had actions today and throughout this week. This is really in the final home stretch of the legislative session when this is possibly going to come to the floor very, very soon. And it's sponsored by Senator Andrew Gennardis, the State Assemblywoman Karina Reyes. And this is our really big push that's happening right now. Hasn't passed, but I'll tell you later what you can do to take action to support the passage of that really important bill. So I want to talk about, lastly, basically, the last topic that I have before we have question and answer, and I share some more information through links, is about what is going on in the New York City immigrant advocacy world, and what the NYC is focused on right now. So similarly, in many ways, like sort of mirroring our state agenda is our city agenda, which is winning major expansion in the city budget for immigrant services of various kinds. I'll mention some of them, and also several bills that are before the city council for immigrant rights as well. So just really briefly, because I know this is a lot of numbers and it's a lot of policy stuff, and I want to leave time for discussion and we can really get to what people are most interested in. But I'm going to mention that also basically this is all up in the air as far as New York City, because the New York City budget usually gets passed in June. So the state budget usually is passed in April. This year it was several weeks late, but it did eventually pass in late April. And I believe it was actually, I'm not going to say the number because I need to go back and look it up. But New York City has a $200 billion budget and has some really critical programs and critical services for immigrants. Some of what we've demanded in this year's city budget, which again will be passed in June, is to maintain and expand 180 million in funding for legal services. So as I mentioned, while we were able to get 64 million from the state for legal services, we actually want even more from the city, and we tend to get more from the city, actually. So I described some of those services previously. So it's split up in various ways, the different programs, but it's all under the umbrella of legal services. Um, Another demand is actually to divest from ICE and abolish ICE transfers and contracts. Right now, there's $10 million in city contracts, and we want to actually divest from that and redirect it to immigrant legal services. And as far as ICE and coordination with ICE, New York for All was the bill at the state level, but there's actually several bills at the city level which would hold agencies accountable for coordinating with ICE and sort of have penalties for that, and also bills to restrict ICE coordinating with the New York City Police Department and the Department of Corrections. So, so that's what's going on at the city as far as ICE. Um, there are a slew of things that we have been fighting for that are to ensure economic justice for immigrant communities. All sorts of things from funding for Department of Youth and Community Development, um, discretionary funds for adult literacy programs for non-English proficient residents, expanding childcare, various programs to also expand municipal banking. And I want to mention that we have bills in the council that would expand street vendor licenses and reduce criminal liability for street vendors. And those are big legislative priorities for the city. Just to name a few other priorities, we're fighting for budget to create a New York City community interpreter bank to expand budget for census outreach to make sure immigrants get counted in the census, and more. There's a program in New York City called Access Health NYC, which is healthcare, subsidized healthcare, including for non-citizens and undocumented citizens. We want to renew the $4.5 million that the city provides for that program. There's also a tenant um, rent voucher program, rent subsidy program, which we want to protect and expand. All right, lastly, there's several education policies that we're fighting for at the city level. Um, Basically, having more Know Your Rights workshops and legal clinics through community organizations and funding and supporting those. Multilingual materials on immigration law, and investing more money in $4 million in immigrant family communications and outreach to improve school access for immigrant families. So that was a pretty detailed walk through what immigrant justice advocates are fighting for really specifically in New York State and in New York City. There are many other small local campaigns and actions going on, but I wanted to really talk about what advocates are focused on beyond just reflexively reacting. And obviously, we want to stage interventions and fight back against deportations and restrictive immigration policies of the federal government, but we also have to keep our eyes on state and city policy, state and city budget, and strengthening state and city policies when the federal policies are really lacking, if not even dangerous and threatening to immigrants. So that really is what I wanted to share about what's going on. I hope you got especially information about what we're doing to fight back against ICE and the Trump administration's use of ICE and deportation. And that is the focus, and that is where I would really urge you to get involved and take action. But I'm going to pause on the call to action and the actions that you can take specifically, and I guess go back to Peter. I don't know if you want to do Q&A or how you want to open up the discussion.
Thanks, Asher. Yeah, let's do some Q&A if people have questions. What I'd like you to do is to raise your virtual hand, and I will call on you through a progressive stack. So if you could do that, if you have questions for Asher, please raise your virtual hand. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Zoom, if you click on the bottom in the button that says React, there'll be something that says Raise Hand. Okay. The first question is from Leonard. Leonard, go right ahead. Please unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted.
Yes, go
And
right
there's the
ahead.
video. Okay. Okay. Thank you. You started talking about actions, but didn't get into specifics. And I wonder if it's appropriate to talk about nationwide action that's happening on June 14th. Today, I received an invitation that I passed along to all of the Nassau Greens that I know from an organization that is not affiliated with the Democratic Party and is sponsoring that march. And I know that things are going on all over. I don't know how many people are on this call from Nassau County. I don't think very many, but I think there are lots of things going on all over New York State, and I wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, so like what I can say about that is that the NYIC is really involved in national coalitions with other immigrant orgs in other states and participates in actions that are in DC, and that are, bringing lots and lots of people on buses to DC. We will have buses, for all the major marches, protests that are happening for the federal level. I can't speak to exactly when, basically like what the logistics of that look like, but I do know that the NYIC is going to be participating, and actually on the website, if you go to the Take Action part of our website, I'm going to describe to you some of the actions you can take as well, but you can also go there to see information about specific events coming up. But we would fully support, direct engagement with federal elected officials, with, protests in DC as well.
Thank you.
I think we have somebody else on the stack. Asher, I don't know if you're still looking for that information. Maybe we could have Jeff ask his question, and then you could respond with the information and then to Jeff's question.
Yeah, quick question. I noticed that it's all New York City based, but do you have anything for Long Island? My colleagues at work, one of my colleagues is in danger, received a letter of immigration saying because he came here without documentation, even though he has his card now, they're threatening to take him out, even though he has his business. Second thing is, can you speak a little bit louder? I can barely hear you. And can't there be other actions like what they did in Tennessee a few years ago? They surrounded the ICE agents and prevented a detention from happening. Can we form some kind of, it says we have the right to form, it's not what you call, I guess it's called well-regulated militia. We go around, we do an alert, we call each other when we spot ICE agents. We call up and we all, whoever's available, we all get together, we follow them to where the house is, and we surround it. Could that be possible too as an action? Thank you.
Sure. So as far as Long Island, we do have staff in Long Island. We have member organizations in Long Island. We have an office in Hempstead as well. So there's a lot of strong immigrant advocacy and community organizations in Long Island. I know that there's one, for instance, named Sepa Mujer, which is in Suffolk, um, which is a Latino community organization, and that's one of the strongest members of the NYC. There's the Elmont Cultural Center is another major one that we work with a lot. And there's a list that can actually provide you the list of our membership out there if you're interested. So generally what we do is know your rights, we trainings, we take people on buses from Long Island and everywhere else in the state to Albany for lobby days and for direct action as well. And so there's a lot of activity on Long Island. I don't work there, so I can't speak a lot more to it. But I can tell you that there's a lot of strong orgs that are part of the NYC and that are heavily involved in it. As far as the emergency response for ICE, that's a really important question because many people have been, since Trump was inaugurated, people want to know what they can do for emergency response. And sporadically, there have been effective responses with people, showing up to try to defend their immigrant neighbors. However, we don't really we haven't had a systematic program at the NYSC because we really haven't had enough information to respond and be on site, be on the spot. And we don't know when and where these incidents are going to happen. So this is the challenge that a lot of advocacy organizations and social justice organizations are facing is how do you respond when it's being done like really surprising surprises that we can't really accurately predict. However, in the past few weeks we've seen this, for instance, a pattern and a lot more ICE activity in the state. Mentioned ICE raiding, or rather showing up at courtrooms and ambushing people at courtrooms. And so actually believe we will be rolling out a program in ways you can get involved with um, showing up at these immigration court with the regular routine proceedings that happen at immigration court, where ICE has now shown this new pattern of showing up and um, arresting people there. So we don't have a real program to offer you right now. Just want to be really upfront and clear, but you can expect to see more soon. And sporadically, we have, when possible, definitely shown up to protest and shown up to when there's an incident with ICE. But we really, it's a game of sort of cat and mouse and catch up, and we are really racing to do whatever we can, whatever is possible to protect immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants.
Okay, thank you. Gloria, I think you're next.
Yes, thanks. A couple of points. One quick question would be, what is the $10 million contracts with the NYPD and Department of Corrections? What are they? The other thing is, it was like, we often say we're a sanctuary city. Other cities are saying that. It seems like, is that enough anymore? Is that coming? I mean, I know they're trying to change that. Trump makes these kinds of threats, but the question is, I almost feel like what does the sanctuary city really mean? What protections are there? I kind of know them, but it's been so long that we just say that and take for granted. I think it may be good to hear from you more specifics. And then I guess tagging on to what Jeff said, I remember during Trump's first presidency, there were these huge rallies where we were standing in front of trucks. I mean, the whole incidents over Rockbeer to be able to keep him from being deported. There was a lot of actions around that. I feel like not only, Asher, your point of it's like we don't know because it's stealth kind of taking of people, but my experience is probably, post George Floyd, the NYPD, they're militarized even more, and there were people outside the courtroom just a few days ago who were pepper sprayed and basically beaten by the police, and over 20 people were arrested when they were protesting that that immigrants were being taken from court after their hearings. So sorry, I know that's a lot, but thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. What I can say is that, yes, in the first Trump administration, it was more, it's a large scale activity. In fact, one of the biggest things that the NYC was very heavily involved with and helped lead was the JFK protests in response to the Muslim ban under Trump, which really galvanized and really launched a sort of era of advocacy and resistance, and coalesced a lot of people around this movement, around the issues around the NYC even specifically. So I was involved in like helping to organize lawyers, legal defense, as well as bodies of people to take direct action and even civil disobedience. We really are trying to coalesce a coalition now again to do similar action, and it's been harder with the tactics used under this administration by ICE, is what I can say. But I think that there have been large scale demonstrations. There was on May Day, as you may have seen, like definitely in New York City. I'm not sure about other cities and municipalities in the state. There's been generalized protests, but there haven't been many that are in response to federal actions and showing up on site, to do that sort of disobedience and protest. So I hope that we see more targeted action coming throughout the summer too. And as far as the 10 million in contracts, I don't have the details on it, but I could dig in. I could send them after this, and maybe you guys could distribute it to attendees via email. I can go and speak to my colleagues who can provide the information and the links and other resources about that. I think I answered or I addressed.
Yes,
both
I
of
think
your
I asked you also about
Yes.
sanctuary cities and what that really
Oh
means.
yeah.
And where are our
So yeah,
limits now? Right.
what does it mean? What is a sanctuary city policy? So really, it means two things: is no coordination with ICE, and it means providing a social safety net and support and legal services, including legal services for immigrants, for the undocumented. And we did see in the first Trump administration that the mayor of New York City, at least, and even I believe the governor as well at that time, definitely had lead, if nothing else, had strong rhetoric, and was really refusing vocally to coordinate with ICE, especially the mayor of New York City at that time. And now under this administration, we know it's a very different situation. And New York City mayor, I won't go all into it in depth, but Mayor Eric Adams has allowed ICE to be active in the city. He's talked about making Rikers into basically a gulag for undocumented immigrants facing deportation trials, and really entertained and to some extent allowed a lot of this federal activity to go on and to be in coordination with law enforcement in New York City. And I think that's really what violates the sanctuary city policy, and that's what the policy is about. And we want to restore it and strengthen it.
All right. Kathleen, please unmute.
Hey everyone, a couple of things. I know Chicago and a number of other cities have formed what they call rapid response groups, and they're basically organized by the communities themselves. They use Signal or some other form of rapid communication, and they just have people who are lookouts in the community where ICE is most likely to attack, at the courthouse, at schools where, it's likely. And then they are also connected with lawyers. And so I think if people are interested, you can do that, whether you have organized it yet or not. It's something that can be done um, with the community and with organizations like yourselves. But I think people should, interested in doing that kind of action. That's one way to organize, and it's a good way for people who do have status to support those who are undocumented and who are being attacked. And my second, this one's more of a question, is I've been working with some of the people with CUNY and SUNY who are doing sanctuary campuses and working really hard to provide know your rights information and also demand that the campuses protect their students. Stony Brook on Long Island, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the campuses involved. So I was wondering if you are also part of work with the campuses, and it seems to be fairly effective from the people I've spoken with. I'm in Buffalo, so UB and Buff State aren't yet sanctuary campuses, but there's sort of a positive atmosphere towards doing something like that. So I was just wondering what your experience with that was.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a great point about local groups, sort of ad hoc, in various places, have organized some emergency response, and that really makes a lot of sense when, people really have eyes and ears in their community and can react and respond quickly. And we hope to build infrastructure to support those groups, but I can't I can't say that we really have that established at the moment. But it is definitely important for local groups to do this. What we do is, and our focus really has been on this new expansion of our Know Your Rights programs, where we really have roots and have membership organizations with deep relationships and roots in their community. And we are hosting in many languages and many, for many nationalities across the state, a really expanded Know Your Rights program, which educates immigrant New Yorkers about how to conduct interactions with ICE. And we do flyering in these communities. We do educational events on a really large scale. But I also want to mention that even that activity has put a target on community organizations, including the NYSE, which has received a letter from the federal government saying that they could strip the 501c3 status from the organization for obstructing federal policy and federal laws. And they have served these similar letters to many of our member organizations. So the Chinese American Planning Council, for instance, has been directly threatened. And we would not want to see this whole infrastructure of community organizations and community support and all the services that we have helped provide just vanish overnight. And so, on some level, you have to proceed with caution, and that's an unfortunate reality of the nonprofit sort of system that we live under. That certain things that nonprofits can do, and that we can't do, or it would really risk and put communities actually in even more jeopardy in some cases. The college, the Sanctuary campus, I certainly have read about it and followed it, and it's a really great development. But I can't speak more to it than what you had said. And I think that NYSC is involved in this certain regions in the state, but I can't speak more to it. But I can go back and get more information about it later and share it with you guys.
Are there other questions for Asher? Don't be shy. Other questions? If there aren't any questions currently, we can hold on for a second. I was going to speak briefly, actually. I think, Kathleen, it's interesting you brought up the Sanctuary Campus movement, given what I was working on my campus just in the last 2 months or so. So maybe I will address that, and we can give Asher a short break before we come back and have kind of a return to call to action. So um, let's see. Boom, 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 boom. There we go. These are always fun moving this around. So I do want to briefly address the campus issue because it is an important one. And I also want to briefly say I didn't really get a chance to talk about this. I should have a little bit earlier about the Green Party position on all this, because it influences what's happened and what I help do at SUNY Oneonta campus. One that, the Green Party is a party that has at its core a mission of social justice. And for those of you who are interested in the Greens and have come to this forum, you can take a look at our national platform online that talks about pathways to citizenship and ending deportations and abolishing ICE. Right, ICE has only been around since the second Bush administration, George W. Bush. And it's something that Democratic and Republican administrations have refused to get rid of, even if you have someone like AOC crying about deportations. Democrats, Republicans support these kind of deportations, and this is disturbing and unfortunate, right? Even with the rhetoric, and the Green Party has always opposed them, and said that they're a tool of big business and racism, right? I mean, there are these twin things that are linked. It allows for creation of super vulnerable workers that are used in industries like labor and in agriculture, right? This is something that I taught at SUNY Oneonta over the last year or so, and the students were, I think, flabbergasted to see this. But deportation. There's a reason Obama was called the deporter in chief, and we opposed it then, and we opposed it under Trump, and opposed it under Biden, and it's been ramped up, right? And we're here as a party to say that we need solidarity with our immigrant brothers and sisters, and that their fight is our fight, right? And that they are human beings, and do not deserve to be demonized and deported and sent to gulags, but that this is part of a broader strategy to profit off of us through repression, and to divide us. And so in that sense, I teach at SUNY Oneonta, it's a small campus about an hour or so west of Albany, New York. And I had two students come to me in the spring semester and address concerns after Trump was elected and say, Professor, what is the campus going to do if, the ICE starts to show up, right? And they couldn't get a good response from the school administration, who kind of gave them platitudes. And so I said, well, we have to do something on campus to fight back. And there are campuses that started to do that. I know Borough of Manhattan Community College in New York City with CUNY passed a sanctuary campus resolution pretty quickly. And so I decided to draft one. This was because I had one of my students is from a Caribbean country of Trinidad, and said that he had gotten an email, even though he had a legal visa to be in the country, that ICE had said that he might be illegal, right? Didn't know what to do. And as the semester went on, essentially was told he should not leave the country, right? Even though he wanted to go home, doesn't really have the ability to stay here. I mean, this is just horrendous. We have over 123 students on campus. We have faculty who have been harassed coming into the country from foreign conferences, and staff members as well. And so, it's imperative on us to organize. And so I, along with other colleagues, drafted a resolution, which I could share with anyone who would be interested, using it as a template that said that, the campus would be a sanctuary campus, right? That we would use our power as much as possible not to cooperate with law enforcement that come trying to get information on immigration status, right? Short of a court order, which is essentially what sanctuary status is, right, for cities. Now, Governor Hochul has an executive order, right, saying SUNY should not cooperate, but those things can go away. We need positive statements and we need wins, right? And we need to show people in our communities that we're fighting with them and alongside them. And so even though it's a small thing, right, it's an important thing. We passed a resolution that said we're not going to cooperate if these officials show up. We're going to do everything we can to protect faculty, staff, and students that are under threat. And we're going to find a way, if students don't feel they can come back to campus, to help them complete their education, right? And I think that's really important. And I think this is something that we can do in localities, fight for not just the school level, but municipal level as well. This has been done around the country. And Asher's right. The Trump administration is ramping this up to 11 beyond what the Biden administration did to just Biden administration cracked down on pro-Palestinian protests, and a lot of the crackdowns are over what they say is pro-Palestinian activism. It's really just whatever they don't like, but it's ramping up to 11, and I think that we have a, a duty to organize and to do so and to push this as much as possible. And whether or not they threaten us, we can't back down in the face of creeping authoritarianism. So if people are interested, I can talk about it. I was very happy that the resolution that my colleagues and I drafted had full support of the faculty on campus. We managed to pass it earlier in May, but it, to me, is a major win at a campus that isn't necessarily known for being very political. It's not Stony Brook. It's not a New Paltz where they had big encampments last year, but it shows that there's broad support for policies of inclusion and defense of international students, colleagues. So I'll leave it at that. If people are interested, I can certainly pass on information as to what we did. I would love to help spread this around New York State as much as possible. And I'll turn it back over to Asher if there's anything else he would like to add in terms of what people can do, how they can get involved, and join the fight.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And I just want to share a couple links. I see the chat is disabled at the moment. It's possible to open that briefly, or we can
Yeah,
send
hold
it
on.
out.
I think we can. Let's see here. Sandy or Cassandra, do you know how to open the chat so that Asher can post something?
Got it. No.
I think I
If you
just
want,
figured
if
that
you want to
out.
screen share, you have to be made co-host.
Oh, well, no, I don't need
Okay.
to screen share actually, but I do see the chat now. So
I turned it on. Thank you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
So yeah, first of all, one way you can take action is digitally by emailing your elected officials. And so we have a tool that I just put a link to that has a prepared form letter that you can customize and send to either your federal, your congress member, or your state or city. If you're in New York City, you can send it to your city elected officials. And it's about protecting sanctuary cities and state sanctuary policy. So I really encourage everyone to do that. It's very easy, very simple. And I also want to just put in one about volunteering with the NYIC. You can volunteer for all sorts of community events, that are pretty apolitical in a sense, but are a great way of supporting immigrant communities, or even some of the advocacy work coming to actions as well. So if you fill out that form, you get on that list to volunteer. You will get to get a lot more information, and you can actually do volunteer activities. One other thing is you can get on the NYIC's email list if you'd like to. I'll put the link in for that. And the last thing is if you are in New York City, you can see the candidates for office this year for city council, district attorney, and borough presidents that the NYC Action endorsed. These just full transparency. These are people running as Democrats, so make what you will of that, But I do want to just share that there are some elected officials and candidates that are much better than others, and we've vetted them, and we can recommend voting for these particular candidates, and you can get involved in their campaigns as well. If that's something you're interested in. I will say that some of the best allies in elected office for NYC have been the furthest left and the socialists in most instances candidates. The 11 socialists that are in the state legislature and New York City Council. And so we work closely with them and we really align with them in politics. And some of them have been great champions for these issues.
Thank you, Asher. I think we have when we have another minute or two. Deborah, I see your hand raised. Maybe you have a short question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, do you have like flyers in Spanish and in different languages? Because I live in an immigrant community and a lot of people don't speak English, so.
Absolutely. So yes, this is something I'm very proud of with the NYC is the multilingual materials, and translation at our events and everything else. But in particular, there are lots of translated materials and lots of things in Spanish. And I would actually direct you to, I'm going to put one more link in the chat that's related to that.
And I have a lot of, there's many people in my neighborhood are Spanish and also from Bangladesh, so in Bangla.
Definitely. So if you, we have all of this resources and materials that are nicely packaged in what we call our community toolkit. And this is really mostly centered around Know Your Rights resources, but I really encourage you to go to that site that I just shared. And you can see down below, there's a Spanish, Arabic, Bengali, Burmese, Chinese, Creole, French, Swahili, Urdu, and Yoruba. The toolkit is available in each of those languages, and you can check out what's in there. And hopefully, one of the things, for instance, is a flyer you can print out in all those languages about knowing your rights when engaging with ICE. And that's one of the best resources we actually have is these flyers in different languages about simply putting with good graphics and visuals, etc., that you can hand out, and people have really responded well in many immigrant communities to that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Asher. This was very informative. And I also want to encourage people to, subscribe, get involved with the NYIC and the actions that are coming up, like people said, this week and on the 14th, the big actions. The Green Party will certainly be involved at the local and at the national level. If you'd like to get involved with the Green Party, please join us at gpny.org. And you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter or X, and I believe we even have a TikTok, although I'm not sure how active we are. But please join us. Please join our mailing list, gpny.org. And as I said at the beginning, we're going to have another talk on June 24th. That's Tuesday, June 24th, just a couple weeks from now, where I'll be discussing what eco-socialism is, and the talk is titled "The End of Capitalism or the End of the World?" ? So we will see you hopefully then, and hopefully you have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Solidarity.